The Galactic soldier shouldn't have touched the Diplomat. But General Katak, a Norgi, didn't believe humans had diplomats. He figured they had pets who wore suits and occasionally spoke in riddles. And, to be fair, the last Terran ambassador did bark at the Trelvok Prime Minister during negotiations. Though, to be fair still, that ambassador won. Now, Katak stood 9 feet tall in the shimmering crystal hall of Zarn Prime. His tusks twitched, breath steamed through secondary gills, and pure rage coiled through every inch of his armor. Every twitch of his membranous arms dared someone to comment. No one did. Up in the balconies, 412 delegates from 117 systems watched through lens eyes, scent funnels, or multi-band perceptive lobes. The crystal hall shimmered with anti-humidifiers and social pheromone dampeners. A tri-harmony choir of Zar officials hummed in the background, making some species fertile and others nauseous. It was a room built to maintain order. Then, Ambassador Miles Harlon arrived, humming The Girl from Ipanema. He didn't glide, teleport, or shift via bio-quantum loop. Nope, he just walked in, wearing a wrinkled black suit with elbow patches and carrying a leather-bound notebook. No entourage, no translator drone, no weapons, not even a rank insignia. "Apologies," he said, squinting up at the balconies. "I got lost. Your hallways are very biomorphic." One of the delegates, a serpentine Glivian, hissed in amusement. "Is this the human envoy?" Katak demanded, his voice like wet thunder on steel. Harlon looked at him, then at his chair, then at the steaming drink a trembling Tsar assistant had handed him. He sniffed it. "This smells like wet regret." "It is ceremonial broth," the assistant said, bowing until their dorsal fronds hit the floor. Harlon nodded, took a polite sip, winced, then reached into his coat and pulled out a thermos. He poured a splash of pine needle tea into the ceremonial bowl, swirling it like wine. The scent caused 3 diplomats from Sector D to convulse slightly. "The human contaminates sacred liquid," growled Katak, advancing a step. No, Harlon said. "Just diluting the regret." Murmurs rippled through the hall, some nervous, some intrigued. Katak's voice boomed again. "This is not how we conduct diplomacy." "I agree," said Harlon. "Diplomacy is usually quiet, cordial, and includes fewer death threats." "I have made no threat." Harlon looked up. "Not yet, but your tendrils just twitched in a pattern matching your race's challenge posture." "I've done my homework." Katak flared all 3 eyes. "Then you know what follows." "I do," said Harlon, closing his notebook. "You're going to invoke some old clause in the Galactic Accord. Trial by consecrated dual honor variant. You'll say I insulted your ancestors by rejecting your ceremonial broth. Then you'll try to kill me." The hall was silent. Katak bared his fangs. "You mock us." "No," Harlon said. "I respect the pageantry. I just question the wisdom." He stepped forward slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the opaline floor. "Tell me, General, is your ego worth a planetary war?" Katak smiled. It was not a friendly smile. With deliberate slowness, he pulled a scroll from a compartment on his belt and let it unfurl. Glyphs shimmered in violent red. "By rights granted to members of the High Accord, I demand a consecrated duel of honor, here and now." The insult was public. The resolution must be likewise. The choir swelled. A Tsar officiator fluttered down, voice syrupy and polite. "Human, do you accept the challenge? You may also concede and offer public groveling." Harlon blinked. "Do you have a pamphlet?" "Excuse me. I want to understand what happens if I decline." There was a rustle of uncertain translations. Katak snorted. "Decline, and humanity is labeled Craven class. All treaties revoked. Your trade routes collapse. Your embassies are void. And if I accept, you die." Harlon mused. "So either extinction of policy or personal extinction." The Tsar officiator tilted its head. "We recommend groveling." Harlon unscrewed his thermos and poured himself another sip of tea. Then he looked at the grand spire of glass above, watched as a fat, ray-shaped diplomatic drone floated past, and exhaled. "I accept." The balcony erupted in howls, clicks, pheromone clouds, and ultrasonic chirping. The declaration was recorded and translated 117 ways. Katak began removing his armor plating. Ceremony dictated he stripped to sacred bone mail. He towered over the human like a battle monument carved in slime and rage. A circular dueling platform began rising from the floor, elegant and slow, like a blooming steel flower. Harlon didn't move. He took one last sip of tea, capped his thermos, and handed it to the Tsar officiator. "Hold this. That might be the last good brew in the galaxy." He stepped onto the platform. Katak roared. His first strike came fast, a blur of arm, fong, and ritual blade. But Harlon didn't dodge. The blow hit him square in the ribs. He flew backward, crashed into the platform's outer ring, and slumped to the ground. Gasps echoed. Cameras zoomed. Delegates began logging declarations of early victory. The officiator raised one trembling limb. "Combat begins." "Already did," Katak sneered. "He's broken." The choir began the victory chant. It was cut short because Harlon stood up, bleeding, breathing, eyes narrowed, calm. He reached into his coat and pulled out his notebook again. His voice was steady. "For the record, General, I accepted the duel. You struck before ceremony was declared. You violated Accord Timing Protocol, Subclause 58. Katak paused. The Tsar officiator froze. "You committed an unprovoked assault on a recognized diplomat," Harlon continued, now limping forward. "We humans call it an act of war." The balcony fell into silence. Several species' color-shifting skins went pure white. A small red light blinked on the side of Harlon's notebook. "What's that?" Katak growled. "A beacon," said Harlon, "broadcasting this moment, this footage, and your violation to Earth's emergency interstellar command." "You bluff." Harlon looked him dead in the eye. "We don't bluff. We write everything down." Katak lunged again. But before he reached Harlon, the room blinked. Literally, every light flickered. Gravity faltered. And from outside, a distant rumble. The crystal walls began to pulse red. Dozens of delegates activated defensive shells. Panic! Warnings! Auto-translators screamed in overlapping languages. Katak spun toward the officiator. "Shut it down." But it was too late. A new sound filled the air. Not the rumble of warships or the scream of fighters. It was quieter, sharper. A single Earth-based directive echoed through the comms. "Protocol Hades has been activated. Diplomatic class breach recorded. Retaliation in process." Harlon stepped off the platform. He retrieved his thermos. Took another sip, blood dripping from his lip. He walked calmly toward the exit. Before leaving, he looked back once. "You wanted war," he said quietly. "Now you'll get our version." Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we start, I hope you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you receive all the new content, and also share the story with your friends so it reaches as many people as possible. And if you have a story, write it in the comments. Maybe we'll choose one to narrate in the next video. Let's start the story. Pay attention, because there's a small detail that might change your entire perspective and awareness of life. The room had no doors. Oh, it had entrances, sure, 5 of them, each sealed by biometric sign locks and reinforced atmospheric pulses calibrated to reject everything from spores to sarcasm. But a door implied something that could be opened casually, right? And the decision room? That wasn't that kind of place. It sat beneath 3.2 kilometers of Antarctic ice, carved into a volcanic obsidian shelf older than every government on Earth combined. No one spoke inside it unless they were prepared to kill something with words. And at this moment, it was silent. Director Afia Becky stood alone at the center, her hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the vertical light field that shimmered in front of her. The display showed Miles Harlon's bloodied suit, slowed to half speed as he delivered the final line. "You want a war? Now you'll get our version." The room didn't echo. It inhaled sound and stored it in black boxes. Afia blinked once, then gave a curt nod. "Archive that as Exhibit Genesis." The field dimmed. A second voice, silken, neutral, faintly amused, filled the air. "Shall I initiate pre-strike simulations, Director?" That was Archive 3, one of the 3 Whisperers assigned to Earth's emergency protocol. Each Whisperer was trained on centuries of human history, art, and war. Archive 3. It favored irony, you know, a bit of cosmic sarcasm. "No," Afia replied. "I want the other 2. There was a flicker. Then 2 more voices joined. One, low and ancient, quoting Marcus Aurelius in Latin, "Fancy, huh?" The other chirping with the tone of a child reading Sun Tzu like bedtime stories. Afia turned her head slightly. "Assessment," she said. Archive 1 replied first. "Diplomatic class violation confirmed. Norgi engaged without ceremony. Treaty breach is incontrovertible." Boom, facts. Archive 2 followed. Suggested retaliation, precision erasure of Katak's home district, followed by silence. Or, if you prefer theater, wipe the planet and send flowers. Now that's a sense of humor. What do you think, at that moment, what should she have done? Gone for the flowers? She took a breath through her nose. The air tasted of electric frost and burnt lemon rind, the result of the room's stress-masking agents. "Open a secure channel," she said. "Command level, eyes only." A dome descended from the ceiling like a crown of bone, encasing her in silence. It was an old design, part war chamber, part confessional. A moment later, a face appeared across the curved interior, Operative Knox. He looked exactly as she remembered him, pale, unreadable, calm as moonlight. His black uniform bore no emblem, no flag, just the trace of a serial code near the collarbone, YC 0000-7. "Status?" she asked. "Packing," he replied. "Light loadout. Single case. Estimated time to drop, 23 minutes. And the ledger signed, sealed, and alive." Afia's mouth tugged into something resembling a smile. "You read the report." "I watched the footage 3 times, he said. "Irritatingly poetic. Classic Harlon." She leaned forward. "I need you to understand, this isn't about revenge." "I know," he said. "It's not even about him. I know that too." Her voice dropped. "This is about the ledger that made him pause. 17 violations," she continued. 4 near-miss extinctions. 8 species who think humans are too sentimental to retaliate. "They'll learn," he said. "They'll burn," she corrected quietly. A moment passed. "I'm not sending you to make noise, Knox. I never do. Don't kill Katak." He arched one brow. "Not unless he insists," she clarified. "What I need is clearer, precise, official." She reached for a small cube beside her, pressed her thumb into its side. A holographic document unfurled between them. The language wasn't English, or Terran, or even linear. It was bureaucratic law, the native tongue of galactic control. "Treaty of Xavos," she said. "Clause 13.7, subsection 6. You know it. I wrote the footnotes." Of course he did. "Good, because today we use it as a blade." She looked directly at him, her eyes dark and hard. "No bombs, no speeches, no show of force. Just you. A document and a signature on the wrong desk." Knox nodded. "Planetary erasure by procedural compliance." "Neatly done." "Elegant," she said. "Almost boring. I'll try to make it less so." The dome retracted. The room returned to its stillness. Then the floor rumbled. Beneath the surface of Antarctica, something began to move. Not a weapon, not a fleet. A case no larger than a briefcase emerged from the chamber's vault. It pulsed faintly with blue and red light. Afia watched it. Not a muscle moved. "You understand the risk?" Archive 3 asked softly. She did. They all did. This wasn't war as aliens understood it. Loud, explosive, posturing. This was human war. A cold signature on a forgotten clause that could erase a world without firing a single shot. It wasn't a warning. It was the end of patience and the beginning of a new galactic record. The drop craft was silent. Not just quiet, silent in the way that unnerved lesser species. It made no ambient noise. No hum of engines, no click of instrumentation. Even the gravity fields whispered rather than groaned. Mercy's shadow, wasn't designed to fly. It was designed to arrive. Operative Knox sat cross-legged in the center of the passenger chamber, elbows resting lightly on his knees, his eyes half-lidded, not asleep, not alert, just present. Beneath his fingertips, the floor pulsed gently, rhythmically, like a heartbeat beneath polished obsidian. The case sat beside him, slim, matte black, unlabeled. It contained no weapons, no explosives, no pathogens. It carried two things: a printed copy of the Treaty of Xavos and the legal authorization of retaliation under Clause 13.7, subsection 6. The weapon was paperwork. The payload was proof. He'd read the document twice since launch, not because he needed to, but because repetition kept his mind from drifting. He hated drifting. Across from him, the walls flickered with shifting displays. No controls, just living light. One panel showed the approaching silhouette of Zarn Prime, its atmosphere a soft blue halo around a world carved in crystalline spires and ribbed tectonic plates. It was beautiful, geometrically arrogant. Another panel showed a loop of the incident. Katak's blow, Harlon's fall, the phrase "act of war," rendered in 42 galactic languages, each translated beneath in deadpan font. Knox's artificial eye, a pale gray orb with a matte ring of concentric microlenses, zoomed in frame by frame. He wasn't analyzing. He already knew what had happened. He was studying posture. The twitch of Katak's shoulder. The weight in Harlon's stance. Intent mattered, especially when buried under ceremonial nonsense. Behind him, the ship's neural interface activated. A voice, neutral, androgynous, Earth standard, said, "We are now within planetary drop range. Atmospheric interference minimal. Shall I proceed with stealth vector?" Knox didn't answer. He stood instead, rolling his shoulders once. Quiet cracks echoed in the room like punctuation marks. Then he walked to the small alcove at the far end of the chamber, a mirrored wall that wasn't a mirror. It reflected him not as he looked, but as the mission demanded he be, precise, quiet, and unshakable. He stared at himself, not in admiration, but in recognition. Beneath the slick black tunic, beneath the emotionless calm, was the man who once held a rifle at 17 while watching a planetary government collapse around his outpost. A man who'd been declared non-essential, then repurposed into a human instrument of record-keeping. Because he didn't panic, didn't cry, didn't ask why. His emotional file read, detachment, stable. In reality, it was quieter than that. The voice interrupted again. Drop point locked. Landing corridor cleared by automated Tsar diplomatic clearance. ETA. 6 minutes. Override, Knox said softly. Clear a new path. Tactical blind side. Civil quadrant. Coordinates locked. Executing. He turned back toward the case, picked it up, and latched it to his forearm with a magnetic strip. It clicked once. It was a sound he liked. Clean. Final. He walked to the hatch. Another scan. Another pause. He could feel his pulse slowing. He wasn't afraid, but he was sharpening. This wasn't a mission with negotiation or ambiguity. This was the consequence of being ignored. A ghost story humans had let fade over the last century, until now. The floor split open. A narrow ramp descended into darkness. Zarn Prime sprawled below. Glowing spires. Artificial seas. Public memory gardens that shimmered with shared dreams. Beautiful and entirely vulnerable. The ship decelerated like a shadow peeling off skin. No sonic boom, no trail. It simply wasn't there anymore. When Knox stepped out, he was already being watched. Surveillance units pinged. Defense beacons blinked in sequence, uncertain whether to welcome or warn. He didn't stop walking. He passed a floating bureaucratic kiosk shaped like a giant jellyfish, its tendrils covered in scrolling legislative announcements. He passed a fountain shaped like a child's memory. Literally, it adapted to the nostalgia of whoever saw it. None of it slowed him. His path led directly to the governing core, a towering helix of translucent steel where all laws, enforcement protocols, and diplomatic data converged. It was part archive, part deity, part weapon. Knox reached the base security gate. 3 guards waited. Half machine, half something else. Their voices clicked in sync. You are not registered. This level is not. He held up the case. They paused, scanned it, scanned him, then stepped aside. The building admitted him with a sigh. Inside, silence again, but this was a different silence. This was watching silence. Living silence. The central chamber rose like a cathedral made of logic and quartz. Every wall held displays, contracts, enforcement metrics, criminal DNA overlays, interspecies precedent logs. The ceiling glowed with soft light filtered through artificial consciousness, and in the center, a single podium. No guards, no fanfare, just the expectation of presence. Knox approached, unlatched the case, and withdrew the document. He slid it into the receiver. The system scanned, evaluated, cross-referenced. Then it paused, which never happened. Clause 13.7, subsection 6, he said aloud, triggering retaliatory escalation under lawful grounds of ambassadorial assault, unprovoked, under a banner of peace. Another pause, then a quiet chime. A mechanical voice responded, not Earth-based. It spoke in a neutral dialect shared by only 9 species and 1 legal enforcement AI. Verified. The walls shifted. Sections of the planet's political map began to illuminate. Entire sectors blinked. And on a single screen, the face of General Katak appeared. Live feed. His mouth open, mid-shout, frozen, captured, and then gone. The system recalibrated. A dozen planetary shields deactivated. Energy routes rerouted themselves. And the core issued a final confirmation. Compliance enforcement initiated. Subject, Zarn Prime. Penalty, total. Knox closed the case. He stood for a moment in the middle of it all, and then walked out. No alarms, no explosions, just bureaucracy doing its job. Behind him, the planet's lights began to dim. The first thing to fall was the light. Not the sun, nope. It remained stubbornly radiant, fixed in its orbit, unaware of the systems below. No, it was the artificial light, street lamps, tower glows, ceremonial domes. They all blinked out at once, mid-cycle, like someone had flipped the master switch for an entire world. The citizens of Zarn Prime noticed immediately. They were, after all, a species obsessed with appearances. Light was status. Illumination was pride. And so, when the western spire hubs dimmed, followed by the levitating gardens, followed by the cascading dome lanterns of the upper Senate, people assumed a blackout. Then the sky changed color. It went from crystalline blue to dull gray, then to a tone that had no name in any known language, but felt like a warning. It wasn't a sky anymore. It was an interface, a message. Below that strange atmosphere, panic began in elegant shoes. Senators tripped on marble stairs. Dignitaries screamed into communication shells. Zarn's finest political creatures devolved in seconds, ripping off sashes, pushing aids, screaming for evac codes that no longer worked. What do you think? Did they deserve it? Inside the core, the enforcement AI continued its work, unbothered by the emotion flooding the planet it served. It was not vengeful. It was not sentient in the way aliens feared. It was simply thorough. Clause 13.7, subsection 6 had been verified. Action was not only authorized, it was mandatory. And so, sector by sector, the system shut down. Not violently, just completely. Transport pods fell from the sky like bubbles losing tension. Power lines hissed out, dead. Orbiting stations, those lovely rings of diplomatic excess, disconnected from planetary defense grids and spiraled into the upper mesosphere, drifting without trajectory. High above, in the sterile stillness of space, the dropcraft Mercy's shadow lingered like a closing parenthesis. Inside it, Knox watched the process unfold. He sat in silence, the case now sealed again, resting beside him like a finished letter. One of the Whisper AIs patched in through a black-line comm link, speaking softly in his ear. Compliance progressing at 94%. Resistance recorded. Attempts to reassert planetary law failed. Final override commencing. Knox didn't respond. He just observed. From this angle, Zarn Prime looked quiet, not dead. Not yet. But drained. Like a symphony had been cut mid-note, and the instruments were dissolving. Behind him, the ship adjusted course slightly to remain within planetary shadow. Not for stealth, but for symbolism. He thought of Harlon, mild, polite, Careful Harlon, taking that blow, drinking pine tea while world sneered. He thought of Katak, overconfident, performative, a war general who mistook bureaucracy for bluff. And he thought of Director Affia's voice, cold, precise, asking for clarity, not revenge. The fall of Zarn Prime wasn't retribution. It was response. On the ground, the effect was surreal. Zarn's capital, the spiral seat, crumbled from the top downwards. Spiral engines depended on orbital microgravity fields. When those were nullified, the building's physics forgot what shape it was supposed to be. Floors twisted. Glass turned soft. Delegates ran through corridors that suddenly led nowhere. In the Eastern Hemisphere, water towers burst, not from force, but from algorithmic mismanagement. Valves closed, pressure backfilled. Elegant aqueducts, once designed to hum in soothing frequencies, now screeched like breaking bones. In the Northern Diplomatic Museum, a curator tried to encrypt records for off-world preservation. He failed. The system denied his access. His status was now classified as unworthy, breach protocol. He wept in 13-tone harmonics. No one heard him. Above all of this, in the planet's highest remaining spire, General Katak finally understood. He stood alone in his war room, claws twitching against the console as the displays collapsed one by one. His breath came fast, thick with stress hormones. This is impossible, he shouted. No one, but someone did answer. A screen blinked. Miles Harlon appeared, unbloodied, standing in a Terran consulate far away, holding a steaming mug of tea in his hand. "General," Harlon said, "good to see you still upright." Katak roared. "You declared peace." "No," Harlon corrected. "We requested peace. You declared a duel. You also violated the Code of Initiation. Clause 5. I remember you manipulated the law." Harlon raised his mug in mock salute. "We just wrote it better." Katak bared his fangs. "I'll appeal." "No one's listening." The general pounded the console, screamed at his aides, none of whom answered. The command grid was gone. The military satellites were mutinous. Even his personal shuttle refused activation. Back in orbit, Mercy's shadow spun a slow arc. It was time. Knox stood again, walked to the interface node, and gave a single spoken word, "Seal." Across Zarn Prime, all remaining systems entered irrevocable null protocol. No more messages, no more interference, no more sound. The planet became dark. Not destroyed, just erased. Officially, Earth had done nothing. No bombs were dropped, no soldiers deployed. The galaxy would find no physical debris of war, no evidence of lasers or kinetic bombardment. They would find a file signed, time-stamped, sealed in a legal core older than most species. The charge: violation of diplomatic immunity. The outcome: compliance enforcement. The galaxy had rules. Earth hadn't broken them. It had simply used them. And now the galaxy would remember. Not because of destruction, but because of the precision with which it had been delivered. Back in the ship, Knox took a final glance at the blank globe. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't bitter. It simply was. A quiet ending to a loud insult. The Whisper AI returned one last time. Mission logged. Enforcement complete. Uploading final logs to Earth memory. Would you like to include a statement? He considered it, then spoke, flat and unhurried. Tell them, that was the last time anyone calls us primitive. 2 hours later, the ashes of Zarn Prime still shimmered faintly in the void. Not burning, not drifting, just suspended like a crime scene sealed behind bureaucratic tape. No one dared approach. The planet wasn't destroyed, not in the way alien empires wage war. There were no craters, no blackened crags, no corpses floating through space. The buildings remained upright. The seas were still. Even the artificial moons continued orbiting with quiet obedience. But the systems, political, digital, biological, had collapsed like a lung-sum sigh. The lights would never flicker again. The planet, once loud with importance, was now still. At the outer rim of the blast radius, though blast was the wrong word, since nothing exploded, Miles Harlon stood at the edge of a temporary observation deck on board an Earth diplomatic cruiser called Ink and Iron. He held a cup of pine tea in both hands. He was no longer bleeding. His ribs had been treated. His suit had been pressed. His notebook restored. And yet, there was something different about him now. Something in the angle of his posture, in the silence between his breaths. He looked through the reinforced view glass, eyes fixed on the frozen sphere that had once called itself the seat of galactic order. Beside him, holograms of incoming communications flickered and died. No one knew what to say. Some planets had gone silent, unsure if they were next. Others were issuing apologies wrapped in song, scent, or acid poetry, depending on their cultural protocols. A few bold species had asked for clarification, asking what exactly had happened, and whether Earth might explain, but Earth didn't explain. Earth sent silence, and silence now spoke louder than any statement. Behind Harlon, the diplomatic chamber door hissed open. The sound didn't break his focus, but his head tilted half a degree. The one person he expected, and perhaps in some quiet part of himself had hoped to see, entered without announcement. Operative Knox. He walked in like someone who belonged in rooms that frightened people. Calm, controlled, the diplomatic case no longer on his wrist. Nothing left to carry. Harlon didn't turn. "You know the worst part." Knox said nothing, but waited. "I didn't even have time to finish my tea." Knox's voice was flat. "There's more." "I know," Harlon murmured. "There's always more." The two men stood together, neither saying the obvious, that they had just ended a planetary regime with a clause in a forgotten treaty. That thousands, no millions, had watched the unraveling of a political behemoth. That this moment, quiet as it seemed, would fracture the galaxy in ways none of them could predict. "You could have died," Knox said. "Finally." "I was supposed to," Harlon replied. "That was the plan, wasn't it? Let the human diplomat bleed on camera so Earth could play martyr. Protocol Hades requires violation, not sacrifice. You made sure I lived. I make sure the ledger balances." Harlon's hands tightened on the mug. "You erased a planet." "No," Knox corrected. "I filed a report. The system enforced it. Convenient. Efficient." They fell into silence again. Outside the glass, the planet hovered like a sealed folder. Harlon exhaled. "I came to talk, not to fight." "I'm not fighting." "But you're not mourning either." Knox tilted his head slightly, as if considering the concept. "You mourn loss." "I don't see a loss." Harlon turned to him now. "Then what do you see?" "Clarity," Knox said. "For the first time in a century, the galaxy understands what we are." Harlon's brow furrowed. "And what is that?" "Not violent. Not primitive. Just deliberate." A moment passed. Then Harlon laughed. It wasn't sharp or bitter. It was tired. A laugh made of surrender and memory, and something older. "You sound like the old Terran philosophers." "I read them," Knox said. "All of them?" Most of them agreed. The sword isn't power. The decision to use it is. He walked past Harlon, stopping just before the glass. Then, in a tone so soft it almost disappeared into the air, "The galaxy made fun of us for being emotional, for being unpredictable, for being human." His hand curled slowly into a fist. "They forgot what happens when something truly human remembers what it is." They stood together in the hush of a new order. Then, from the far side of the chamber, a ping sounded, sharp, persistent, and flagged in crimson diplomatic code. Harlon turned. The hologram bloomed in midair. A message, not from a government, but from a species. Not in apology, but in fear. The title read, Earth Designation Status. Request for Reclassification. It had two words beneath it, Untouchable Observer. Harlon let the words hang. Then he looked at Knox. "You've started something." Knox gave a faint nod. "It was already started. We just turned the page." Outside, the galaxy continued spinning, unaware it had changed. Back on Earth, beneath Antarctica's ice, a room with no doors sealed a new file into the ledger. It did not label Zarn Prime as a battlefield. It labeled it as an example. A footnote on the cost of underestimating patience. And so the message went out to every corner of space. The soldier struck the diplomat. 2 hours later, his entire planet was gone. And with that, we have reached the end of the story, but stories don't end here. If you like the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you receive all the new content. And if you have an opinion or something that caught your attention, leave a comment and let's discuss together. I'm waiting for your opinions, and see you in the next story. Bye.